If I walk off of this planet rather than dying off the planet, does that mean I don't have to come back here anymore?
That question is so screwy on so many levels. First, you'll leave just like everyone else does. In other words, you'll withdraw your attention from this time-space reality and you'll reemerge into non-physical. And next, those decisions are made from that non-physical perspective, in which case you can't get back quickly enough. Because from that non-physical perspective, you know the perfection of this time-space reality. These questions, they're common, but they come from the human perspective of someone who is not yet consciously, joyously controlling their alignment with Source. In other words, when you are controlling your alignment and in alignment with Source most of the time, then you speak about this planet and about your life here on this planet in the same way that your Source energy does. You see it as something fabulous, as something wanted, as something delicious, as something invigorating, intoxicating, something that calls you, you see. And so we really want you to understand that this time-space reality, it calls you forth because it's part of the calling of that broader picture, you see. The continuum of expansion is all about this leading edge environment. And we know when you're standing in the middle of something not wanted, Jerry and Esther had an interesting experience that is laughable to them now, but it felt so real when they got home. The stones on their new patio that had just been laid around the guest house were beautiful the day they got there. They were so beautiful. And Jerry and Esther were just amazed at what the architect had designed and what the landscaper had chosen, and the combination of all of it, it just knocked their socks off. They were crazy about how it looked. And then the next day it rained, and that morning, as Esther went outside, she noticed that the stone in some areas of the patio was badly stained. And so she asked the landscapers to bring their pressure washers and wash it off, and when they did, it didn't wash off. Esther could hardly believe it. She got her scrub brush and her bucket and came out and scrubbed on a spot just to see if it really would not budge. And they were right, it would not come off. And so then another expert landscape architect said to them, this will never come off. This is a permanent stain caused by copper sulfate that is in the fertilizer that they used. And so now Esther is feeling such frustration because she was only allowed to see her beautiful patio one day before it was, in her evaluation, ruined. And so now she is beating the drum of that. And that drum led to other rumblings that she has beat before that are not completely dormant within her vibration. That go something like, I can't control what people do, and I can't control what they do around my home when I'm hardly ever home. And I'm hardly ever home, by the way. I'm hardly ever home. I'm hardly ever home. And those who are home are messing up my patio. And the more she beat that drum, the worse she felt, the more disempowered she felt. And so Jerry sort of walked in on the middle of that as Esther had been stewing about it and had convinced herself, as she begrudgingly put her brush and bucket away, that it was really ruined forever. And when Jerry came back into the house, Esther was not the bright and shiny Esther that he is accustomed to seeing, or even close to it. And she said to him, what are we going to do? And she didn't only mean about that, she meant about everything that she couldn't control. And Jerry said, well, I suppose we'll have to live with it, as he glibly went on his merry way. The ornerier Esther was, the more absent Jerry was. And the more absent Jerry was, the ornerier Esther was. In other words, she wanted to just grab him by the shirt collar and say, call somebody, do something, fix this, change this condition so that I can feel better again. And Jerry has given up control of all things like that long ago, which often irritates Esther, because there are times when she would like a little manly control in her life. And so for about 2 days, Esther sort of was depressed about that, and Jerry was missing in action as much as he could possibly be. And Then, finally, Esther realized that she was making herself miserable, and so she sat one day and turned to the process in this amazing Power of Deliberate Intent book and opened the process that she has newly found that always makes her feel better no matter where she is on the emotional scale, where she identifies in the first question asks, what is the condition? What is the contrasting situation? And Esther got out her computer and she wrote 3 pages of what was wrong. And then the next question says, and how is it that you want to feel? What is it that you want? What has this experience caused you to want? Well, she got a little stuck there because she wanted it not to have happened. And she wants the experts that she hires to do expert kind of work. She wants Jerry to agree with her. Well, she knew she wasn't going to get that when she came to that place. And then she wrote, I want to return to who I am. I want to feel better. I want this not to matter. And then she struggled with that for a moment. No, I don't want to lower my standards. I just don't want to feel bad like this. I don't want it to matter so much. And then the next question said, and what is the emotion that you are feeling? And Esther wrote, powerlessness. Sort of triumphantly she wrote that. I feel powerless, and it's their fault. And then the next question says, now, do whatever you can do to close the gap between where you are powerless and where you want to be, which is feeling good again. So just posing that question, Esther felt she didn't recognize that she was turning her boat because we had not been offering that analogy at that time, but she felt decided relief in the moment that she did. And actually, the fact that the process even exists means that it's all right to be wherever you are. In other words, she wasn't an immoral person for having a gap to close. There was something sort of forgiving about the process and the existence of the process, because Esther had been really mad at herself for being so upset over something so unimportant and embarrassed about it, but she couldn't get out of it. It was like the vibration had her by the throat and she couldn't quite break loose from it. Even though she wanted to, she had not been able to. And so now she is feeling a little better right away. And now she sat and looked around this beautiful room, and she saw the mesquite fireplace mantle that weighs so much it took 3 men to lift it. And they attached it to the fireplace with these beautiful iron sculptures that another artist made. And the entire cottage has been gutted and refurbished, and there is so much evidence of talent and skill and effort and love in this environment. And as Esther looked around, she began to weep with appreciation. She could hardly believe that something as insignificant as those stones outside had been the reason for her torture for 24 hours or more. And as she, in her appreciation, began to acknowledge all of the beautiful things, she closed her gap. It was such a fast move up that emotional scale. Jerry sort of tiptoed back into the house later, not knowing that Esther had improved her vibrational state of being, and she announced to him, I'm healed, I'm cured, all is well with me. And then she said, I've been thinking about these stones, and they were always sort of bright and shiny and new looking for this old cottage that we've refurbished. And maybe we should just make the same mistake everywhere that they made there, because it does look old. It does look like it's been there longer. Or maybe we should just let nature take its course. Maybe we should just let the patio be what the patio wants to be. And maybe we should just enjoy the evolution of the patio. And Jerry is standing in amazement. He can hardly believe that he's talking to the same person about the same subject that he had been avoiding so carefully for so many hours. And then they went off to lunch to meet Tracy and Kate and Luke, and Esther went back into the kitchen to get her cell phone, and the washing machine was backed up and flooding all over the kitchen floor. And Esther said, no problem. She called Mike, and Mike brought help, and they went to lunch, and when they got back, the problem had been solved. And we said to Jerry later, so nice that Esther cleaned up her vibration before the flood. or the flood would have killed her. And the flood was the residual of the other. In other words, things don't turn around on a dime, do they? How you feel is how you feel, and you are this powerful magnet attracting to you. But the fact that Esther was in a much better feeling place made the flood inconsequential, and that was the end of the reign of terror, so to speak. Certainly Esther was right. Those gardeners should have known better. Certainly the instructor should have instructed the one who was actually applying the product. Certainly it should have been different than it was. But you really did not intend to come forth and have life prepared for you, so that all you would have to do is observe the perfect life. You came forth to create the perfect life. You came forth to get your hands in the clay. You came forth to make your own decisions. You would not like being a puppet on a string. We promise you, if you were source energy in this physical body and you did not have the option of variety, so that you did not have those choices, but all there was something that someone else had created and you were here just to observe it. Can you see what we meant by your question being screwy on so many levels? In other words, you did not come forth just to observe, you came forth to create. And you can't create without variety, and you can't create the way you really want to without experience. And in all of that is joyous expansion. What we want you to do is just lighten up and not take it so hard when things are not going the way you want it to. If you just could understand that it's never a question of if you will get what you want, it's only a question of when. There is nothing that you cannot be or do or have. The question is just, how long will it take me to turn and go in the direction of the flow? In time, what you come to understand is that the more contrast you live and the more things you ask for, the stronger that flow moves and the faster the ride is and the more exhilarating it is, you see. It's like being on the crest of that wave with the exhilaration of well-being. And when you're riding that wave in the knowledge of well-being, then you never crash and burn. But sometimes physical beings get the energy moving really fast. Jerry and Esther certainly have done that. And when that energy is moving really fast and you get pointed in the opposite direction, you take it really, really hard. It was totally illogical by Esther's standards for her to be so upset over something so inconsequential with so many things going so well in her life experience, you see. But when that energy moves fast and you don't go with it, you have a harder time. And that is what we are hearing from you here. We can hear you from your place of very fast-moving energy, occasionally getting crossways of it and then wondering, why in the world would I subject myself to that? And we say, that's only ever spoken from a human perspective who is in the moment worried about the patio stones or something. When you are going with the flow of who you are, you don't say, oh, I won't come back. You say, I'll be back and 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 I'll be back, because I am eternal seeker of joy in my never-ending expansion.
Yes, thank you.
Really good. Really, really good.
Thank you.
Good time for a segment of refreshment. We are complete.